Welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone has had a good break. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Luann, a member of the Design, Marketing and Communications Subcommittee, and I will be your MC for the second panel discussion. Without further ado, let's begin our second track and welcome our four speakers. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Novia Andayani, who many of her students fondly call Ibu Yani. Dr. Andayani is a conservation biologist with over 30 years of experience serving as country director of the Wildlife Conservation Society Indonesia program. She is also a senior lecturer at the University of Indonesia, where she teaches and researches in fields such as conservation biology, conservation genetics, and evolutionary biology. Her work spans across research and field projects to guide practical, evidence-based conservation and policy across Indonesia. She is especially passionate about inspiring youths to be more active stakeholders in wildlife conservation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Andayani.
Especially the first tracks, but I try, to do my best. It's been like sitting in my classroom facing these young people. So my name is Novia Yani, but you can call me Yani as lecturer and then also conservation practitioners. I'm always excited whenever I have the opportunity to talk with the young people, and hoping that at the end I can convince you guys to stand for wildlife and their habitat. So for this, I thank the Youth Organizing Committee and NParks for having me to celebrate World Wildlife Day together with you all. Human populations growth along with their associated growing needs for natural resources have cleared enormous tracts of tropical forests, as you know that. And taking from my country, Indonesia is a home for the third largest tropical forest in the world. And for the past 20 years, the country has lost around 32 million hectares of humid tropical forests to meet our economic development needs. And once intact forests being cleared, it creates an open area at the edge, what we call it as edge effect, that facilitates and presents easy access for wildlife, and then of course then further accelerate the negative human wildlife interactions, which then furthers, as the interfaces between wildlife and humans getting closer, the risk for pathogen spillover is also becoming bigger. And you have seen this is a very famous One Health logo. You've seen it from Dr. Amil presentation, from the previous from Dr. Indah, and then from Nga. But I think I would like to come out with a quite a different way to interpret One Health. As you can see from the previous speakers, One Health, I think this is such a nice concept, unifying concept, to bring different sectors leading with health, public health, human health, and then environmental health together. But, as a conservation practice on the ground, sometimes this concept is not easily translated into a real actions on the ground. So for us, we know that the intact ecosystems, the resilient ecosystem, the functional ecosystem is foundation to provide life on Earth. But however, we know that most of the times, economic development pathway are detached by this fundamental fact. Therefore, again, I think enhanced and then stronger collaborations among different sectors dealing with health is really, really important. So with that, we would like to define One Health as a unifying concept that provide the continuum care for intergenerational and interspecies health equity. And I would like to address your attention to the word intergenerational and interspecies. This is one of the reasons I'm excited to be here, because I'm talking with you. This is, I think passing on the healthy planet and healthy environment is the responsibility of our young, older generations. But I think for the owner of the future generations, we would like to hear more from you guys. This is just to provide, to illustrate what happens once we clear the intact forest, creates the edge effect, and then now we know that with the modern transportation systems, now the spillovers, the zoonotics that identified in one remote area can be easily and then rapidly transported from to all over the world. The wildlife living in the forest provide the hazard, but our activities through land use change, deforestations, unsustainable harvesting resources use, and legal and illegal wildlife trade really amplifying the risk, transforming the hazards of biodiversity, and that including the variety of pathogenic within this wildlife into our human dominating system. We've been talking about pangolin. I'm using pangolin, in this talk is not as I think Dr. Amil mentions that there are very few evidence that really show closely the relationship between the deforestations and then increased human-wildlife interactions and the emergence of new zoonotic diseases. But I think I would like to use pangolins for a couple of reasons. First, if you guys remember, pangolin is one of the among species which been suspected as the host for COVID-19. Although later studies, ruled out this possibility. But the thing is, what's so devastating and heartbreaking about pangolin, about the species, is that unreasonable demand for this species. You can see that pangolin has been widely illegally traded. Pangolin is one of the most illegally traded in the world, for a reason that doesn't completely make sense to us. So you can see, how every body part of pangolin has been used for something that doesn't have a really strong scientific evidence of the value of this species. On the right side, I'm just showing that where the pangolins came from Indonesia and where to go. The thicker lines showing the volumes of the pangolins, and then we can see the pangolins from Indonesia is taken from every type of forest, but mostly including the palm oil plantation. So the case of pangolin to me still represents a very good model of vicious circles of unreasonable demands of wildlife, deforestations, and weak governance on the ground. So because quite many pangolins also are taken from the wild as well. Now the major source of pangolin, the forest from Sumatra and then the forest from Java. And what we can do. So I would like to end my short presentations, because I'm only given six minutes there, but it's nice because I don't want to as lecturers, once I'm holding the mic and standing in the class, I can talk forever and ever. But now it's good that I'm having only 6 minutes. So, but I would like to end this presentation, and this is just a couple of the things that I hope that you guys, as the owner of the future, can explore and can consider. I'm not going to read what's been written there, but I'm here today and hopefully tomorrow. Please reach out to me if you would like to explore more what we can do together to secure a healthier and safer planet for all of us. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andayani, for that engaging presentation. Our second speaker for the panel is Ms. Darapon Chairat. Her career has primarily been with the CITES Office of Thailand's Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation. She is currently the Director of the Subdivision of CITES Implementation and Monitoring. Previously, Ms. Darapon also worked in the Wildlife Division and served as Director of the Subdivision of Natural World Heritage. Ms. Darapon will now give a short introduction about herself and the important work she does. Let's welcome Ms. Darapon.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a privilege for me to joining you on site and online here at the World Wildlife Day Youth Symposium 2026. So today I'm going to share with you with the illegal wildlife trade in Thailand, focusing on the challenges for frontline officers, also the challenges for management of confiscated wildlife. So just bring you to get to know about the structure of the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation Department. That just only the part that related to the CITES conventions. So on the left-hand side, the Wild Fauna and Flora Protection Division. So they've got the three key functions that are related to the CITES implementation. The first one is the CITES Trade Permission Subdivision that responsible for the authorized the import and export or re-export the CITES listed only for the terrestrial wild animal in accordance with the CITES convention, also with the relevant wildlife law of Thailand. And the second one is the wildlife checkpoint. So now we have the terrestrial wildlife checkpoint worldwide for 47 checkpoints where conduct the clearance of the wildlife import and also export, and also the undertake investigation and enforcement the operation to combat international illegal wildlife trade. And the third one where I'm working with is the CITES Implementation and Monitoring Subdivision that responsible for the coordinating with the CITES Secretariat and also the relevant agency in Thailand, also abroad, that to ensure that the Thailand's implementation of the CITES Convention is comply with all the provision of the convention. And moving to on the right-hand side, is the Wildlife Conservation Division that deal with the post-seizure wild animal. So there are also the three main functions that are related to the post-seizure confiscated animal. The first one is the Wildlife Rescue Center that responsible for the relocation, quarantine, health examination, medical treatment, and also the rehabilitation of the wildlife, that's supporting the care and recovery of the confiscated wildlife. And the second one is the wildlife breeding station. It's different for the first one as the wildlife breeding station that's responsible for the care of the confiscated wildlife. Also the wildlife that involved in the conflict mitigation cases that have already undergone screening, health check, and also the quarantine by relevant authority, also by the wildlife rescue centers. And the last one is the Wildlife Forensic Science Center. So this center is responsible for the mainly identify the species of the confiscated wildlife by the genetic. This slide shows you about the illegal wildlife trade cases in Thailand over the course of 5 years since 2021 to 2025. As you can see that the illegal wildlife trade case increased. So for the 2021, it's just 25 cases. This includes domestic and international cases. And it's saw to 75 in 2025. And when you look at the group of the animals, for the one that most traffic is the reptile one. So you can see that there were 3,826 individuals of the reptile that been trafficked, and followed by the birds group. It's not very far from the reptile. It's like for the seized bird that happened during the 5-year course is account for the 3,585, which is not very far from the reptile one. And for the mammal is 1,496. So it means that the demand for the animal is goes like heavily on the reptile and the bird. Normally it's for pet. And when you see the species that most trafficked, this one, as I mentioned, is not international one alone. Is also include the domestic one also. So for the mammal, the most trafficked one is the Indo-Chinese flying squirrels with 155 individuals over the 5 years. And for the birds, the red whisker boo-boo, which is the songbird, that people love to take them for the competition, singing competition. Is like for the 5 years, there was traffic and then were intercept for 2,277 individuals. And if you looking at the international airport, which I focus just to the main one, the Suvarnabhumi airport is they have faced heavily the traffic animal cases over the 5 years for 115 cases, and for the Don Mueang International Airport is 24 cases. And for the photo at the bottom of this slide show the activity that our department have done. Is like the investigation at the border, and also when then they intercept the wildlife, they check the health and also record the number and also the species initially that they can identify. And also the middle one is the one that is the primate that we intercept at I think in the Suvarnabhumi airport. Yeah. And the last one is I forgot. The reptile that most traffic is the Indian star tortoise one, which account for the 1,186. And typically it happens at the Suvarnabhumi airport by returning flight from India. And the challenges that the frontline officer faces, I can say the first one is the organized criminal network, because the challenges we face is now we can arrest just the small courier rather than the kingpin behind the network, right? And the challenges we face, the second one is the transboundary trafficking route. As the same as here, we are also act as the hub of the transportation. So the challenge we met is the challenge we met here. We require the international cooperation and also intelligent sharing for the more effective enforcement. And the challenges that we also face is the identifying the wildlife species, as we've got the limited knowledge when identifying the non-native species, which normally is the CITES one. Yeah. And the last one, the challenges we face is the handling and the caring for confiscated wildlife, because for carrying the live animal, we need the resources a lot, and we have got very limited for that. And also the risk of the zoonotic disease transmission, I don't know much about of that, but I'm sure that when when the front line handle the confiscated, maybe they don't know well about the risk that they've posed for the zoonotic disease, right? And then that's why we need the trained staff for that. And the challenges that we face for managing the confiscated wildlife. For the first one is the immediate veterinary care. So because when the traffic animal came, they came in the poor physical condition and also with the stress and trauma. And they may also include the disease that might be spread to the people who involved, that are the disease including the zoonotic as well. And for the last seizure animal, so we have got very limited space for caring of the last seizure of animal, and the cost to doing so is very high. And for personnel who doing that also got a lot of pressure on this. And the third one for the challenging is the disease and zoonotic risk. So we require the veterinary support for the quarantine procedure and the disease screening to prevent the zoonotic transmission. And the last one, the decision to repatriation and release or long-term care, because the challenge we face is not all animals are suitable for release into the wild due to the risk of the disease transmission and also the skill of the survival by themselves. And the most important one is the unknown origin of the confiscated animals. So that end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Darapon, for that insightful overview of illegal wildlife trade management. Our third speaker is Dr. Debbie Ng. She is a transdisciplinary scientist and science communicator whose work bridges ecology, public health, and storytelling. From coral reef conservation in Singapore to investigating illegal wildlife trade, her work highlights how wildlife crime is not just about animals, but also about the communities, governance, and the global systems that drive demand. As lecturer at the National University of Singapore, she works across research, policy, and public engagement to connect science with society and inspire conservation action. Dr. Debbie will now share a brief introduction about herself and the meaningful work she's doing. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Debbie.
Thank you, Ibu Yani and Dr. Darapon, for that really insightful introduction into wildlife trade in Southeast Asia and all the impacts that it's having. I'd like to start by asking a question, and I'd like for you to tell me what is the first thing that comes to your mind when I say this, okay? So I'm gonna come to you. Okay, you ready? You ready? I'm gonna ask a question, okay? I'm gonna say the words, wildlife trade. Okay, all right, I'm gonna go around and you're gonna tell me what's the first thing that came to your mind?
Bird.
A bird. Okay, great.
Pangolin.
Pangolin, okay.
Illegal.
Illegal. Very good. And Wildlife trade, what comes to mind?
Unethical.
Unethical. All right. To prove my point, I need one more answer. Okay, wildlife trade, what comes to mind?
Livelihood.
Livelihood. Very good. What about an animal? Darren?
Pangolin.
Pangolin. Okay, thank you for your participation. This is a very educated audience. I was not prepared for that. But I think one of the things that we saw, apart from the bird outlier, was that most of us tend to think about the wildlife trade as illegal. Who was it who said it is illegal? Unethical, yes. And also we tend to think about mammals. We don't intuitively think about reptiles, as we've just seen, are a very important part of the wildlife trade, or even amphibians or plants or invertebrates. And so the other thing was that I mentioned wildlife trade, and many of us immediately made the leap to think about the illegal wildlife trade. But the wildlife trade is not quite so black and white. There is the illegal wildlife trade, which is very important, and conservation organizations need us to know about that because it's endangered and rare animals. But there is also the legal wildlife trade. And in Singapore, you may be familiar with a scene like this. I'm sure all of you have seen this. Birds living in cages, stacked on top of one another, dust and feathers. We don't intuitively walk past a place like this and think that this is an illegal wildlife trade, but it is. It's such a common scene that we take it for granted. This afternoon, I invite you to consider a new perspective. When you think about the wildlife trade, it's not just about conservation. It's about the movement of pathogens as animals are being transported around our region and around our globe. Every bird in this cage has a story. How many hands handled it? How many birds were crammed together in transportation? How crammed was it? How long did it spend in transport? How crowded were the conditions? All these details matter because the more crowded the conditions, the higher the transmission. The longer it spends in transportation, the more likely it is to have met a human being or another animal that it wouldn't have met naturally. And how many different species were crammed together? All these details matter. So, have any of you been to walked past a bird shop like this and you've seen, great, heads nodding, great, and you've seen maybe a tree sparrow or a Javan myna, these are local birds that fly around, or a little spotted dove that walks by one of these cages to pick up the seed on the floor, to pick the food out of the cage, and share airspace. Those moments are almost invisible, but they happen. And each of those moments are small exposures. The people who work with these birds are also at risk of being exposed to viruses and bacterial pathogens that these birds may be carrying from the various places that they came from. What we're looking at here is an interface between humans, captive birds, and wild birds. And the next time you walk by one of these places, I'd like for you to see the bars of the cage not as a barrier, but as an interface. And this is important because once we see it as an interface, we can put in interventions. Hygiene, quarantine, less cramped conditions. These are all potential interventions to manage outbreaks. Here's another common scene. We don't walk by something like this and think of it as a wildlife trade, but it is. So just like the birds we saw, those little moments invisible to us, small exposures repeated often. In Singapore, we consume 120,000 tons of seafood every year. 120,000 tons. Do you even know how much that is? 50 Olympic-sized pools full of fish and shellfish. No water, dry pools, just fish and shellfish, 50 pools. Again, small exposures repeated often. Singaporeans love our ornamental fish. My dad used to have several fish tanks in the house. I myself used to rear, and I was a very good breeder of Malayan betta fish. Singaporeans love ornamental fish. We're one of the largest re-exporters of ornamental fish in the world. We've just seen some people buy fish to eat. Some people buy live fish as pets. And some people buy live fish for religious animal release. This is a practice that comes from a good place, good intentions, compassionate place, but unintentionally perpetuates the wildlife trade and contributes to the spread of pathogens. When we release animals into the natural environment, two things can happen. The first, it dies. That is a welfare issue. The second, it survives. And then it continues to live in our ecosystem and meets other native wildlife, and they share pathogens. So this is another pathway by which the wildlife trade can contribute to ecological introductions, not only of non-native species, but their pathogens. So all of these scenes, again, very common in our neighborhoods. I'd like for you to realize now that this is happening all around us. The wildlife trade is not happening in some exotic place, some faraway rainforest, or some exotic Chinese market. Zoonotic spillovers are not limited to those kind of environments. Often when we think about spillovers, we think about something dramatic. But oftentimes, spillovers happen through mundane, everyday circumstances. And again, this is important that we realize that this is happening all around us, because then we can take interventions, governance, vigilance, stewardship. Stewardship in how we trade, how we travel, and how we consume. Only then we actually intervene in the micro moments and stop the risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Debbie, for sharing your greatly valuable insights. Our fourth speaker is Dr. Shangzhe Xie from Mandai Wildlife Group. Dr. Shangzhe is Vice President of the Veterinary Healthcare and Scientific Programs at Mandai Wildlife Group. His research focuses on understanding how diseases affect wildlife populations and how health monitoring can support conservation programs for threatened species. In a world where habitat change and wildlife trade are bringing humans and animals into closer contact, this work is crucial for managing disease risks at human-wildlife interfaces. His perspective helps us better understand how wildlife health, conservation, and ecosystem stability are deeply interconnected. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Shangzhe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the first three speakers for laying the groundwork. So now you understand how some of these definitions come about, what they mean. And Dr. Debbie also started to stretch your thinking of what some of these terms actually include. I will continue to stretch your minds a little bit more. Sorry, this first slide is very boring. It's just one Chinese character on a white background, right? Does anyone know this Chinese character? Quan. So Quan, I'll get to why this character is on the screen, but Quan tends to mean all, everything. So keep this in mind. I usually start telling this story from the moment I land in China about 3 years ago, but I'm reminded that there are some NParks colleagues here. So actually, because they're here, I can tell the story a little bit further back. Because NParks actually went to China to look at some of their wildlife rehabilitation and rescue centers about 3 years ago as well. And they went to this center in Nanjing. And interestingly, the zoo director of Nanjing then asked them if they knew anyone from Mandai or Singapore Zoo, because they were running this China Zoo Association workshop for zoo directors for Chinese zoos. That's how I actually got to attend that particular conference. So my purpose there was to share what Mandai has done, how we care for our animals, what we do for conservation. But at that conference, I was also introduced to the Chinese term that they use for One Health. So it was quite interesting because this university lecturer went up and she was talking about this new concept about how, human health, environment health, and vet health or animal health is all interlinked, right? I remember this is 3 years ago, and then I was thinking, well, that sounds familiar. And then she said, in their academic circles, they were debating for a long time, and they finally settled on the Chinese translation for One Health, and it was 全健康. Because or at least if your Chinese standard is like mine, I would just have said, it's 一健康, 一 meaning the number 1, right? But those, China university professors actually debated, probably for 10 years or so, because One Health as a concept in the Western world has been around for almost 20 years. And then 3 years ago, they decided that there's a Chinese term for it. So maybe they debated for 10 years, and they came up with 全健康, which I thought was a very good translation. And I'm not here to tear down everything you've heard about One Health so far, but the problem with One Health is that it's been around so long, but then it hasn't really changed much in the sense that the One Health is dominated by the One Human Health. So even though you have seen the circles, the 3 circles, human, animal, environment drawn in equal sizes, in reality the human health circle is almost the entire screen most of the time. You have 2 tiny circles at the bottom just to make up numbers. And in terms of reality is when you go apply for a research grant, for example, a One Health research grant, if you don't make your link back to human health well enough, you're at a very weak point when you compete with other applicants. So the good thing, I think, about rethinking how we call One Health. So in Chinese, now they're calling it 全健康. Actually, if you translate that back into English, actually you should be calling it all health. And to me, all health is more all-encompassing. So now it's not about the one, now it's about all. And you can even stretch that to be more than human, animal, and environment health. So yes, this is why this word is on there. But then when I made this slide, it was one of the first times I've seen this character so big, right? And the problem with seeing it so big is now I realize there are only 2 parts to this character. So if your Chinese is a bit better, you know what the top part is of this Chinese character? Chinese, it's ren. Ren means man, mankind. And the bottom word is Wang, meaning king. So even though the meaning is a lot better, when you break down this Chinese character, the human is still the king. So I don't know, maybe the Chinese professors need another 10 years to come up with something better. This one's a bit more colorful. This is bringing me back to the times when I did my PhD in Australia. And it's a World Cup year, so Australia is still Asia, because in footballing terms, that's the only time Australia is in Asia. For most other purposes, it's Oceania. You will have seen some of these birds on Dr. Debbie's slides. The middle one is meant to look like a budgerigar, I hope you can tell. And then there's the zebra finch at the side as well. And this is the story of the 3 little birds. A bit like the 3 little pigs, but it helps to summarize my PhD thesis in a more easy to understand way. These 3 birds represent the 3 common orders of birds found in the Australian desert. So the middle one, the budgerigar, represents the cetaceans. And the story here is about how they each cope with the extreme heat in Australia. So most of this research is done in the deserts of South Australia, and there in summer you can get days above 40 degrees for 2 or 3 weeks at a stretch. So these birds need to evolve to cope with that kind of heat. But then with climate change, it's actually pushing their boundaries. The budgerigar, or other parrots that live in the Australian desert, they cope with this by being very smart. That's why he's wearing glasses and a tie there to look like a very academic person. The parrots know to hide during the hottest times of the day. So they are never exposed to the very extreme heats. So even in the outback, actually there are trees, there are shrubs, there are plants that they can hide in. And when they do that, they tend to find that their environment's about 30 degrees, which is very tolerable for them. So that's how parrots cope with heat. On the other extreme, that very muscular bird at the end, that's a diamond dove. And he represents columbiforms, so pigeons and parrots that live in the outback. This group of birds, they are strong because even when it's 45 degrees, they will go out and look for food. So you will see, even on a 45-degree day, that pigeons are roaming around the desert, pecking on the ground, trying to get the seed. And that is because they have evolved to be able to cope with heat as long as they have access to food and water. So they're very efficient at evaporating water. Even the food, if it contains a little bit of water, they can use that to evaporate, they lose heat, and then that allows them to continue to forage. So I always say, they're a little bit less smart. Pigeon lovers don't like hearing that. And that's why they've evolved to be able to just continue doing what they need to do, no matter what the circumstances are. That other tiny bird, the zebra finch, it represents the passerine birds, the songbirds of the Australian outback. And this group of birds kind of lie in between the other two in terms of brain and brawn. So they are not the smartest, they know to hide, but then they get a bit desperate sometimes and they will need to come out and look for food when it's super hot. What we have found in this group of birds is that they have higher levels of something called heat shock proteins in their whole body system. Heat shock proteins, as the name would suggest, they are proteins that protect the body and the organs from extreme heat. That needs to be explored a bit more because heat shock proteins, it's not just one protein, there's hundreds of these proteins. And in human medicine, researchers have been finding different functions. Some of them might fight cancer and things like that. But we were studying it as a very fundamental function of protecting birds from heat. So anyway, that sums up my PhD thesis. And in essence, it's just telling us that different birds have different ways of coping with heat. And the heat is going to get worse with climate change. But then because of these different ways they cope with heat, they are at different levels of risk if the weather continues to get warmer. So for parrots, if they continue to lose the sites where they can hide, so if they lose the shrubs, the trees that are in the outback, then they are at a lot higher risk than something like the pigeon, which just relies on their own body system and how they cope with heat. This is my last slide, and it's a story that reminds us that it's not all about infectious diseases. Because when I start to dig a bit deeper into the One Health concept, when the environment starts to affect the bird, it's not always about increasing their risk of catching an infectious disease, a bacteria, a virus, or a fungus. This bird on the screen, his name is Yari. He's a great pied hornbill, and he had squamous cell carcinoma in his casque. So hornbills have that big thing on the top of the head, and it's called a casque, right? And only great pied hornbills have been shown to get a cancer inside the casque. The problem with having cancer inside the casque is it's very difficult to see that the cancer has happened. Most of the time we only see it when they've started to knock the front because they feel something inside, they're trying to get to it, so they keep knocking it. And in the past, it was a death sentence for this species. When they get it, there's no way to fix it. Even when they're inside the zoo, there's no way to permanently cure it. So when we had this case, it was at a point where the technology was advanced enough. We could now do CT scans. We can do a lot of non-invasive biopsies. So for this case, we could do a CT scan, which allowed us to make that cover. So that white part is what we put on top of his head after we cut the whole cancer out, right? So this whole story usually takes 15 minutes to tell, so I cannot tell his whole story. My point here is that Yari lived in Jurong Bird Park and now Bird Paradise. So you should come. You can't see him on the front, but because he's back trying to make some babies. But you can see some of his friends when you come visit us. But the point is that actually this is not a disease of captive or animals that are under human care. I've been shown photos around Southeast Asia of great pied hornbills in the wild with lesions that look like squamous cell carcinoma. The problem with wild birds is that there's no way you can treat them the same way as we treated Yari. So for those birds, it actually is a death sentence. And the way that we think great pied hornbills get this cancer is because they are exposed to more UV than they're supposed to. So in some zoos, if the tree cover is not enough, because in the wild they live in very dense rainforest, they're not supposed to be exposed to that much direct sunlight. So we think because of those conditions in some places when they are not in the wild, that's why they are more prone to it. And only this species we think is affected because this is the only species of hornbill where the secretions are not like sunscreen. So every other hornbill, if you run out of sunscreen, you can go and squeeze its glands, put those secretions on you, and it actually blocks UV light. I don't know what SPF is at, but at least it will block some. But for great pied hornbills, their secretions don't block UV light. So we think that's why they are the only species that are affected by it, and they are going to be extremely prone if climate change continues to increase the UV levels around the world. So this is one example of a disease that will get worse. As the environment health gets worse, the animal health gets worse. So again, I'm just trying to bring this as an example so we start thinking about non-infectious diseases that can get worse if we don't take care of one health or all health. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shangzhe, for sharing your experiences with all the youths here today. We will now be commencing the panel discussion for track 2. I would like to invite all the speakers back on stage, as well as Darren, our moderator for the second track, Human-Wildlife Interfaces. Darren is a first-year student in the National University of Singapore's Bachelor of Environmental Studies program. He is also a member of the Speaker Track subcommittee.
All right, hello everyone. I think you all enjoyed the presentation so much. Each speaker has their own style, and I think it brought us a lot of good insights and a lot of fun as well. So good afternoon all. I'm Darren, and I'm your moderator for our second panel, Human-Wildlife Interfaces. Please clap. Thank you everyone. Before we begin, let's do a very, very quick activity. I will list some everyday actions, and if you have done these actions or you have seen people around you do it, please raise your hand and keep it raised. Is everyone ready? Okay. Yes, of course. Okay, do you know anyone who share animal photos or videos online? Do you know anyone who take photos with animals while traveling? Do you know anyone who buy animals and plant products online without really checking where they came from? Oh, quite a lot, right? Okay, everyone please put your hands down. These actions are not harmful on their own, but depending on context, they can shape demand, they can normalize harmful practices, which affect wildlife and habitats in ways we do not notice. In our track, Human-Wildlife Interfaces, we examine the interfaces which are less direct. We examine how people, markets, and systems can interact with wildlife, and how sometimes these interactions are not always beneficial. We are no longer asking, is wildlife conservation important? We all know it is. That's why we are here. But we want to ask a harder question. What mechanisms promote harm, and what levers we can use to shift them? So we can start the panel, and as the panel before, you can scan the QR code on the screen if you have any questions throughout. QR code, please. Now, okay, very well. All right, so let's get all the speakers warmed up a bit by asking a fun opening question. What was one moment that made you realize that you wanted to work with wildlife? Was it an animal, an incident, or a special encounter? Please.
That is easy one. Can I start first? Of course. Being the oldest? No. My first love is the Javan gibbon. So I fell in love with this endemic primate species in Java. I think they're the cutest gibbon species ever. Whoever who works with gibbon do not agree with me, you can come and see me later. But the points with the Javan gibbon is Java in Indonesia is the densest island in Indonesia. About, I think, over 130 million people live in Java, and then that island has lost over 90% of forest cover. Yet, the Javan gibbon remains. So, to me, the Javan gibbon represent hope. And then, whenever I ask, why I'm keeping, over 30 years working in this business, is because I believe conservation is about hope. And hopefully the message and the resilience of Javan gibbon can be being inspired and then transferred into many other species in my country, Indonesia, also in the region. So there you go.
I think the Javan gibbon can inspire all the youth.
Yes.
For me, it started when I was very young. So I live in the countryside of Thailand, where my father loved to keep birds as a pet at home. So that gave me the opportunity to familiar with the bird, especially the singing. Is that called singing? Songbird. Yeah, yeah. Also, my hometown is close to the one of make me familiar with the nature. So. For the Khao Yai Natural Park is rich in the biodiversity, including the bird species, also the Asian elephant. Maybe you already aware of that. So based on that, it's brought me to select to study in the university in Bangkok. Study about the forestry, where I learned about the ecosystem, about the wildlife conservation, also the protected area management, and also conservation. So that's kind of piled up. That so I'm thinking that I'm gonna work with the protected area, also the wildlife. And then when I joined the Department of National Park, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, I was appointed to work at a position that related to the CITES Convention, so which is related to the international trade in wild fauna and flora. But for the DNP, is just fauna one. So that's its kind of combination with the exposure in the young age, and also my education and also my work. That's why I'm working with wildlife conservation now.
I see. I think that's very beautiful. Dr. Debbie?
So I had a bit more time to think while you guys were sharing your stories. Similar to you, I grew up in one of Singapore's last kampongs in Nee Soon, so I had a lot of wildlife around. And I always enjoyed being in the company of animals, but I never pondered working with wildlife because, to be honest, I didn't even know that there were those opportunities when I was a kid, right? The closest job you could have to being with animals is a vet. And so I read a lot of James Herriot, and I thought at some point I'll be a vet. But to specifically work with wildlife, I kind of fell into it. I was one of the first people in Singapore that were trained to do illegal wildlife trade, monitoring, and an investigation by traffic. And that was because I was a real nerd. I spent all my holidays in the library, I did. And I read a lot of books about all the traffic reports, very dry, but very exciting for me. And it was through that I became interested in wildlife crime. And so, sad to say, many of the first wild animals that I saw were in fact dead. And many of these were in Singapore. And it was only through that work that I realized that it was so prevalent in Singapore. Warehouses full of dead wildlife. And that really shocked me, of course. I think as anybody here, if you walked into one of those spaces and saw just the sheer number of dead animals, you would be shocked. And so that's how I kind of fell into the wildlife work. And then because of seeing so many dead animals, I actually needed some reprieve from that. So I ended up going to an animal rescue center in Sukabumi to work with some living wildlife. and again, through those pathways, got to build my network with people that were working in different avenues of wildlife conservation, wildlife disease monitoring, and slowly found my pathway into disease ecology and to where I am today.
Thank you. We are thankful that you accidentally fell into the wildlife conservation side. What about Dr. Shangzi? I think you have a lot of stories.
Yeah, I feel like my stories are very childish or childlike in comparison. There are two parts to what maybe inspired me to want to be a wildlife vet. The first part is about being inspired to be a vet, right? And that part I feel is really childish. I grew up in city Singapore, like no kampong already by the time I think. So all my parents let me keep were hamsters. I was breeding them quite successfully. I thought I was making a lot of money. Because when I sold it back to the pet shop, all the money came to me, but I didn't take into account who paid for the food and all that. So I thought I made a lot of money. I was doing Mendelian genetics also. I was trying very hard to get the albino. So you cross a cream and an albino hamster, you get the brown with a white stripe in the middle. And in theory, if you keep inbreeding them, I know very bad. I work in a zoo now, we don't inbreed. Last time I inbred my hamsters. If you keep inbreeding the brown with white stripes, in theory you have 25% chance of getting an albino, but I never got another albino again. But anyway, so I was very interested in hamsters, right? And I think I was about 10 years old at the time. And then I think my favorite one got sick, and I couldn't save it. So that was when I thought, I need to study very hard so that I can save hamsters. But fortunately, I treat more than hamsters now. So that's the part about wanting to become a vet. The part about wanting to be a wildlife vet, also very childish. I watch a lot of cartoons, and I was inspired by Captain Planet. I don't know who knows Captain Planet. Yeah, but Captain Planet himself is a blue person. Like his face is blue. I don't know how that works. And one of the characters in there, they all have these rings, and their powers shoot out, and Captain Planet comes out. Right. One of them is the animal guy. I think his symbol is a heart, and he can talk to animals and all that. So that kind of made me want to work with wildlife. Yeah.
So since very young, maybe the youth nowadays will have their own cartoons that make them step into the wildlife field. So we have all these like beautiful and cute animals, right? And of course we don't want them to die. So this makes me think about what Dr. Novia said earlier about how, even as we are in cities, through the clearing of forests, age effect, diseases can spread, animals can be affected. So I want to know from your experiences in WCS Indonesia, what are some real impacts of human activities you have seen in the cases you worked on?
I think I got two examples, but let me start with one. Currently, we are facing a very urgent and dire situations affecting one of our endemic species in Sulawesi, babi rusa. Babi rusa is the body looks like a baby, but I think the face completely different with a very, very, imposing tusk, right? And only live in ponds in Sulawesi. And 2019, if I'm not mistaken, we found the first case of African swine fever. The virus that affected actually first domestic pig, but then got into the wild pig. We got interested. I personally got interested because African swine fever when they came in the refugees, suddenly they killed, almost wiped out all the wild pig populations in Sumatra, where we work. WCS has been working in Sumatra since 1997 to save Sumatran's tiger. And then we invest a lot in protected area management, putting smart patrol on the ground. Hundreds of $millions have been put into that. And then I said to the team, I know I will be, we'll be, what's called it, how the English expression of that, the dooms, if we, after all this investment, we just ignore one thing, that the tigers, went extinct because they lost their food. Because pigs, in Sumatra is one of the major prey. So we got interested, and then somehow, luckily, the pig population, the wild population recover. So we thought, okay, this virus only affects the sus species, and baby rusas different genus. So we thought, well, it should be fine. It's not going to get to baby rusa, but little we knew. So once the virus got to Sulawesi, and then that's if you can see from my presentations that there was a people in the edge and the peripheries of one of the stronghold of baby rusa in North Sulawesi. It's called Bogani Naniwarta Bone National Park Bonawa. We didn't know that the pig consumption, the domestic pig consumptions, the not very highly sophisticated biosecurity managed by the community to raise their pig brought the virus. Now, after a very quite intensive camera trap, twice we found almost none of baby rusa. And but then we expanded the camera trap setting, and we only found one individuals in the area in the Sat Lake there. Where, before, every time we set up camera, we always found baby rusa in that area. So this is to me one of the example whereby, right, the traits. Doing not in a very careful way might bring harm, not only to matters to me, because we are wildlife conservation society, but before that it can endanger affect also the livelihoods of the Dayak people in Kalimantan as well. So I really hope the idea of all health, can address that.
I see. So it's quite a pity to say that careless trade can cause such big harms. So on the topic of trade, since we have the CITES Thailand representative here, there was a lot of challenges you mentioned earlier about implementing trade, from criminal networks to identifying species to care and seizure. What's the one you worked most on? What's the biggest challenge?
For me, I think controlling the illegal trade is the most challenging, because when you come to the legal and regulated trade, so the procedure like the CITES permit come in place, and the diseases screening also in place. Also for Thailand, the department that in charge of the disease screening is the I think the livestock development department. When you would like to import or export animal, you have to know the destination of that species, the requirement that if you would like to export the group, you have to get the screen of the certain disease, like for the primate one, you have to screen for the TB, and for the bird, you have to screen for the avian influenza, that kind of stuff. Also, when you regulated trade for the live one, you have to also comply with the IATA regulation, which is the International Air Transport Association. So that's care of the animal welfare when it's travel by the airplane also. For that, for the regulated one, also the legal one is not a problem. But the problem comes to the illegal one, because the illegal wildlife trade do not follow anything. Do not follow any procedure, do not need to screen any diseases. And then as Dr. Debbie already mentioned that when it's trafficked, they normally be hidden. They put in the small tube, they put in the even in the underwear of the smuggler, and that pose risk seriously, because it's unscreened animal, and then you put it, attach it in the body. So when you got scratched, you don't know what you're gonna get from that animal. So for me, the illegal trade is the one that. Yeah.
I think it's very true because they don't follow any procedures. Then it's very worrying. It's very hard for us to catch them also. In the morning, I think we also saw in Singapore, the pangolin scales were disguised as fish skins, which might fool some unassuming officers. So besides trade, Dr. Debbie reminded us a lot on how small exposures, repeated often, can pose risk. So what are the transmission pathways, right, that are most probable in ASEAN? Bring it back to us.
Well, most probable in ASEAN? I don't know. I think that there are many disease ecologists that are cracking away at their computers trying to find that answer right now. And that's one of the wonderful things I think that we don't see, is that there are huge communities of diverse groups of people from different backgrounds that are working together to try and explore which pathway is most probable. I think the WHO has highlighted that it was bacterial diseases are super under surveyed, as we heard from the other speakers, that there is a disproportionate attention to the amount of animals that are being trafficked based on the diseases that are more harmful to humans. So if I just focus, I guess, in Singapore, I don't know about ASEAN, but we've already heard about Asia, the African swine fever. But also, I do wonder about birds. As you know, Singapore has Singapore and lots of countries in ASEAN are part of the migratory route, the Asian flyway. And also, Asia is one of the largest producers of poultry in the world. It may not seem like it, but Southeast Asia produces about 40% of the world's poultry production. The world's poultry production. And I think Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam are the largest in Southeast Asia. And it's a mix of different types of factories. So they have the open type factory, they have very high intensity, all completely closed up, ventilated, artificial light kind of systems. So many different types of systems, all scattered throughout the Southeast Asian group of countries. And then we have these migratory birds that are going around. We have intensive bird trade that is happening in the region as well. And as you just explained, Ms. Darapon, that it is largely unmonitored. The wildlife trade, which happens everywhere throughout this region, is largely unmonitored. So that could be a potential pathway. And also, it's one of the pathways in which humans have a lot of direct contact. So whether it's a human being working in a poultry farm, as you can imagine, birds everywhere, birds and dust and feathers everywhere, and people without PPE or protective gear working in those environments, probably not vaccinated, don't have regular screening. Of course, in some of the high-tech farms, they may have all of those things in place. But I recall a friend of mine who was a vet from South Asia, so this is not Southeast Asia, but he explained that when there are outbreaks, because the broiler chickens, I think it was a bacterial disease, that when that disease is detected, because this landscape is just full of blocks and blocks of chicken farms, so once they detect an outbreak in one block, that block is closed. And all the people that work on that block have to stay in that block with the chickens for 21 days. Why 21 days? That's when they go to market. So as long as they close that farm to prevent the outbreak, they can protect all the other chickens in the other block. So it's also a human welfare issue. Nobody wants to be trapped in your chicken block for 21 days. But because it's also an economic issue, right? They don't want to spread the disease, so they close off that block. But usually these are marginal groups that are employed in these farms. They don't have much power to push back, and so they have to work in these farms. So I think what we're seeing is both a welfare issue in how the animals are being kept in these high intensity farms, but also the people that have to work in this place. So I think that's a nice combination of situations that are happening to allow for outbreaks to happen.
I see. It really ties back into your presentation about how it's the everyday situations. It's your poultry farmer, it's your chicken farmer, it's your bird shop owner, or just now when you mentioned the urban bird, look at the bird inside the pet shop. Diseases can always transmit. Since it's very hard to prevent them outright, then I will ask Dr. Shangze, our vet here, that when a disease emerges, when a zoonotic threat emerges, what is most important and why? Is it early detection, containment, or treatment?
All right, I'm going to be long-winded with my answer and pick the most important by process of elimination. So it's not going to be treatment because there is no treatment for a lot of these diseases. So I agree with Debbie that avian influenza is probably the most imminent threat right now. And because it's a viral disease, there is no good treatment. I mean, if it's one very precious sick bird, you can give it antivirals, you can give it everything possible, and it might survive. But if you're dealing with thousands or even millions of wild birds, I don't think there's treatment. So that's not even an option for most diseases when there's an outbreak. It's not going to be containment because when we're talking about the whole population of birds in the world, you cannot contain them, especially because birds fly, right? So they don't respect your borders at all. So there's no way you can restrict wild birds from going to a certain place. And I think having sat through some avian influenza prevention workshops, the way it usually gets into a country is the migratory bird goes in, interacts with the local ducks or other waterfowl, and then the waterfowl goes, interacts with the chickens in the poultry farm, and that's how everything gets amplified after that. So because there's no way to contain wild animals, firstly, then there's also no way to contain some of these pathogens. Also, the other thing, also expanding on what Debbie has said, the environment, also linking back to the three circles, right? Human, animal, and environmental health. The environment, whether it's because it's a farm with very poor conditions, or it's the natural environment that is becoming worse because of the combination of all of human activities, the animal health starts to decrease. And those are things that you don't even know. So I already mentioned UV causes cancer. That one I think we understand quite well. But as your air quality becomes worse, as your temperatures start to become unpredictable, then your immune system across the whole ecosystem just gets weaker. And that's when the pathogens that probably has been around for a very long time starts to have a chance to grow and infect some of these hosts, the animals. And as more pathogens infect the same host, that's when your genes start to mix, that's when the pathogen starts to mutate and evolve, and eventually that's when it jumps to humans, right? So that brings me to the only remaining answer, which has to be the correct answer, at least for me, is early detection. But actually just now over the buffet outside, we were talking about how early is early. I think when you already have your first case and then you try to detect it in the rest of the flock or population, that is not early. That is too late. That is like years too late. To me, because I like to stretch the definitions and boundaries, to me, early is picking it up when there is a chance that it will happen. We are not able to do it now because firstly, the technology is not there, and maybe the resources to develop the technology is not there. So again, using avian influenza as an example, we are actually in most parts of the world facing and fighting an active outbreak. Singapore is one of the last few places that doesn't have an active avian influenza situation going on. And we're very fortunate, but everywhere else, the focus now is on trying to detect which strain of avian influenza is predominant in there. The focus is on the highly pathogenic avian influenza because that's what will cause the problems, that's what will become zoonotic and infect humans. And to me, that is all too late because if you want to be early enough, if you take one step from the highly pathogenic, you need to be detecting the low pathogenic avian influenza in the first place. And if you want to go even one step further, you need to detect when your birds start to be at a weakened state where they are prone to catching low pathogenic avian influenza. But because all the resources are now dedicated to firefighting the high pathogenic avian influenza outbreaks, you can never elevate it enough to catch it early. So even though ideologically I think we should be detecting it much earlier, I think we are very limited by what we can do. But if we continue to dedicate resources, early detection is what the science should focus on.
I like how you stretch the early to before the disease even starts, so that we can avoid all the costs related to containment, to treatment, and to link back to our panel before. Just now, Mr. Amil said prevention is better than cure. Very good, everyone. Got pay attention. Okay, so I think you all have heard enough from us. We want to hear from you too, so keep those questions running. I think everyone's been sitting quite a while already, so can I invite everyone to stand up, stretch a bit, about 2-3 minutes? Stand up, don't be shy, everyone. Up. Yeah, stretch a bit, then after that we'll start asking your questions. Thank you. Okay, once everyone's done, please proceed to take a seat because we'll be asking your questions soon. All right, so we have gotten a lot of questions. So let's just start with some. Okay, I think this one covers quite a bit of what everyone does. But if we want to reduce both wildlife trade and zoonotic risks in Southeast Asia, where should the priority lie? Is it consumer behavior, governing of trade, field enforcement, or surveillance systems? You guys, one for each speaker. Can. So if you want to reduce both wildlife trade issues and zoonotic risk in Southeast Asia, where should we prioritize? Should we try to change consumer behavior first? Should we try to manage our trade better? Should we go down into the field to see where the pathways lie? Or should we focus on surveillance systems to capture the diseases?
I don't know if I will answer for everyone because I don't think you can choose one over the other. Like if you miss out on one of those, then the rest will fail.
It's a system, right? Everything is working together. And I think that is one of the challenges whenever we, in real life, is we want to prioritize. I mean, yeah, we want to prioritize something, but really we have many teams that are working and they all are priorities. Just like our body, all parts need to be working in harmony for it to be healthy. Yes, but I do think that also that question of reducing wildlife trade and zoonotic diseases are two very different methodologies, very different mechanisms. And so we do have to look at them separately. There are different expertise that are required to examine both of them. And so far we've been talking about wildlife, like zoonotic diseases, like it's one thing. But there are dozens and dozens, hundreds of zoonotic diseases, like potentially zoonotic diseases. We do know those that are already problematic, right? But if we want to stay ahead of the curve, to get there before things become epidemic or pandemic level, then we actually have to be surveying everything. And I think that that's where ASEAN is really important, that collaboration. As a region, we have transboundary collaborations, transboundary workshops and networks to support each other. The exchange of information is extremely important. I think that was not in the list of options. But sharing of information is extremely difficult, but very important. If countries need to work together, especially in a space like ASEAN, where not only is there a lot of trade that is moving across this region, but people as well. So movement of people and animals and other kinds of contaminants, whether it's soil or plants. These are a lot of things that we don't often think about, like fungus that could become infectious. But yes, sharing of information and collaboration, and I think that's something that we really need to emphasize, especially in the world today, where where there's a lot of like protecting of information, to actually be more collaborative, working together. That also requires funding and time, and hopefully that is a challenge that we can overcome in the next few decades with all these youth. Yes.
Right. For me, I would like to echo both of you that every single sectors are important. But if I would have to prioritize one, I might put my priority onto the demand reduction one. But for the animal that are being illegally traded, because if the demand is so high for the illegally traded one, so it's drive the poacher to poach more animal from the wild. So that make the animal loss. Also, because as mentioned before, so you don't know what the disease they carry. So it's like got the high risk to get the pathogen spread. But if you can reduce, demand can be reduced, so you can reduce the chance of the animal being taken from the wild, also reduce the zoonotic disease spread also.
Well, again, as the last one. I mean, again, I second what the others have said, but I'm a great supporter and a great believer for protected area, and to me, preventing at the source, making sure that no wildlife gets out. I know it's such a tall request, but once the wildlife gets out and then get into the market, it will be very difficult. And this is a complex, system. I mean, from our work in North Sulawesi, for example, whereby everything was consumed, the wildlife being heavily consumed there. We've been doing a lot of awareness, educations, demand reduction, including, consuming the brains of from macaca nigra, the Sulawesi macaques, critically endangered and endemic. and it's been going for years. We saw the slight reductions, but the practices is still there. So back into this, I think making sure that wildlife kept in their habitats. I think it should be prioritized. And then people said, well, protected area is not good enough. It's not strong enough to protect wildlife. I think it's because we haven't done enough. We haven't investing enough to make sure that our protected area are designed to protect wildlife. They're always, the funding for protected area management always being downsized by others developments needs. So again, Dr. Amil, let's continue develop as many ASEAN heritage parts as possible, so we can get the 30 by 30 by 2030.
Okay. Firstly, thank you, Dr. Chang, for pointing out the loophole in the question, because it's one ASEAN, one system, one health. Whoa. And then, demand is a very important thing that we need to cap. Protected areas are also things that we need to invest in and continue doing so. So I want to ask, because we see how animals will come to us no matter what, be it through like fish shops, be it through trade, or be it when people consume them. So how can we prevent these animals from being a source of pathogen spillover when it's inevitable that we will come in contact with them?
So I think the mitigation measures are already well known. So hygiene, quarantine practices, they are established. They may not be well implemented. And what we see in the front of the markets or bird shops may not represent what's happening in the warehouses or where these animals are being bred. And as we've already heard, the conditions in which these animals live, the stress that they endure, affects their susceptibility to diseases and things. So I think one of the nice things, if we just talk about a Singapore context, I don't know about the ASEAN context, but at least in the Singapore context, the ABS is quite responsive. And I think that now that we know that all of this wildlife trade is really happening everywhere and not just involves exotic species, endangered wildlife, that fish shops, about 98% of marine fish are actually wild caught. In the birds, it depends on the species, but in some species, about 40% of them are wild caught. They are mixed together with the birds that are captive bred in these pet shops. And so it may seem very innocuous, but there are wild-caught birds in there, in these pet shops. And vigilance, as mentioned earlier, is a really important intervention. And all of us here, we walk past these shops every day, whether they are bird shops, they are markets, and we can all play a role in participating in this surveillance and vigilance. And I myself have done that. It's really simple in Singapore. You just take a picture and you WhatsApp NParks, and that's it. Yeah, and they will respond. And of course, no system is perfect. It is difficult. These are difficult problems. That's why they still exist. Despite all the information that we have, the implementation on the ground is very challenging. But that's why it really takes all of us to see that we do have powers to participate in this process. So if there's one intervention, that could be it. Because to mobilize the public, and we've already used this in other diseases like dengue, right? We've mobilized the public. There are a lot of community vanguards that are actively going out there to educate people about dengue because we care about it. And so the public participation is really important. The agencies already know what they need to do, and the guidelines for how the animals can be kept in better conditions, less stress conditions. These do exist, but the implementation and the vigilance could be improved, at least in the Singapore context.
Okay, so I'm glad that,
Oh, are you moving to the next question? Or?
No, of course you will add on first, then I will move.
Because Debbie covered the safeguards that Singapore and most ASEAN countries have so well. I'm just answering the question in a different way. I think because there are already so many opportunities or situations where it's inevitable, the animal comes to you, right? Like you said, you have to eat them or have a pet or things like that. I just want to, on behalf of someone working in a zoo, make a public message to not go to animals, right? They already come to you so much, and then if you still want to go and interact with them when they're not coming towards you, you're increasing the chances of disease spillover, zoonotic risk and all that. Also not complaining about our zoo visitors, but sometimes they ask to be able to touch certain animals, and it's because they see, people overseas can go to a capybara cafe and pet capybaras. They can go to a tiger temple and touch tigers, and they come to our zoo and they are like, where can we touch capybaras and tigers? And even though we want to tell them, go to the cafe, but we don't now. We just explain to them why we don't do this, and both for the animal's sake and for your sake, right? So don't interact with them that much.
Actually, if I may add, because he made me think about something, which is, so my work also involves working with diseases like distemper. I don't know if some of you may have heard of distemper and rabies, which move between mammals. In Singapore, we are fortunate not yet to have rabies, but one of the, because you mentioned don't approach the wildlife, and this is one of the things that I'm quite passionate about, is that many people have dogs in Singapore. And our dogs are vaccinated, and they are cared for. They have lots of food. They have a nice warm place to sleep at night. And so they have nice, robust immune systems. And they, when they get sick, we may take care of them. But we still bring them out to walk, and then they poop and they pee outside. And in Singapore, we do have otters. And that love to, I'm sure you may have seen them roll in the ground. They love to do that, roll in the ground. And we may think that even when we pick up the poop, that then the source of contamination is removed, but really it's not removed. There are mucus that remains on the landscape, and the scale of dog ownership in Singapore is huge. At any one time, you may not see so many dogs around, but if you stand at one point and you count the number of dogs that go past a certain point in a day, it adds up. And the animals that move in our waterways, that interact with the ground, whether they are, Singapore got so many, we're very fortunate, we have all these wildlife in our urban landscape, right? We have the chickens, we have monitor lizards, and they all carry their own unique group of pathogens that, which is normal, right? Even humans, we all have our unique groups of pathogens, but there's all this mixing that's happening in the environment. And I'd really encourage everybody to try and mitigate these, even though it looks very cute to let your animal go close to some of the native wildlife, to keep them away. And this is something that I think we can do on a daily basis. If we walk our dogs 3 times a day, that's 3 opportunities you can reduce your pet from leaving something that could impact the native wildlife, and not encourage them to go close to the wildlife if there's wildlife in the area.
I think that is very, very enlightening for all of us, because there are simple actions, some of which you should promote, or being vigilant, keeping track of the birds that should not be there, and also some actions that we should stop, like touching animals at the zoo, or having your dog go too near to the otters because it's cute. Yeah, so I think these are small actions that can have huge and real impacts. So I want to bring the conversation a bit to wildlife trade, because I want to focus on Ms. Darapon and Ibu Yani lah. Cultural practices and beliefs, especially in indigenous communities, right, are a reason why illegal wildlife trade exists. Just now, I think one of the slides, don't know which animal can have black magic or something. it kind of reminded me of that. So how can we sort of shift behaviors, although when these like long-term benefits or the benefits of trade are so ingrained in these communities? Like, they use them for different purposes, they use them as their livelihood. How can we help them?
I think, if I may, for a certain degree, this kind of cultural practices, when it's done in a subsistence way, I think it's okay. And then, for example, the Dayak people, they use a feather from the hornbill as a part of their traditional dance and then traditional, ceremony. But the thing is, as the populations grow, and then the communities become open to another much more commercial economic system, then I think the cultural shift happening, and it is something that we need to pay attention to. Another examples that's I use the traditions of some people in Sulawesi to consume wildlife. I think when those local community, especially live around the forest, consume wildlife, I think it should be okay in the subsistence way. But the problem is, as the population grow and then they become open to more commercial economic system, now we found the wildlife is not only sold in the market close to the village, but can be also found in supermarkets in the big cities. Now the wildlife should, currently as happening is being imported from other parts of Sulawesi. So that to me is no longer becomes traditional or subsistence. When it happens, law enforcement to me is one priority response that we need to put in place, because the arguments of cultural practices and then subsistence way no longer applies when the scale of the consumption of the use of wildlife goes beyond subsistence way of living.
For Thailand, for the community of Thailand, they normally don't use the wildlife as their food, because almost all of the wildlife in Thailand probably are protected species. So it's not allowed to hunt, it's not allowed to even it's not protected one, if they are in the protected area, is protected by the protected area itself. So actually, it's not allowed to for the community to use them. So if they use them, it's illegal, illegal taken. So actually, we actually don't have the problem with that. So yeah.
Can I add an example from China? Not that I'm from China. Pangolin scales are so in demand because it's used in traditional Chinese medicine, right? But the Chinese government has really bought into the idea that the pangolin is a species to be conserved, that they've gone back to the root of that demand for pangolin scales. There's a book called the Ben Cao Gang Mu, which is basically, I don't know the English term, but the traditional Chinese medicine practitioners go to that book to look for what to mix together to give you when you're sick, right? And they've gone to that authority book to take out all the formulations that ask for pangolin scales. And in addition to that, they didn't just say take it out and your thing will work just as well. They actually tried different things and they said take it out, but instead use this flower or that leaf instead, and it will be as effective or even more effective. Which means now an entire generation of traditional Chinese practitioners hopefully will refer to the new version of this book and not ask for or not prescribe pangolin scales as treatment. So I think that's where we challenge the thought that tradition cannot be changed. Because tradition, if you go back to the source, can be changed. It will be slow, but it can be changed.
Thank you, speakers. I think governance is something that connects all the speakers together. be it through promoting more sustainable ways of trade, be it through distinguishing between what's legal and what's not illegal, or providing alternatives to once illegal food products. So I think because we are nearing the end, I would like all of you to speak directly to our audience, What is one message that you'd like to give to the youths here? Because a lot of times we care very deeply about these animals, about these issues, but we feel like we are unsure of what we want to do. So what's one call out, one action you'll tell them and us? Anyone?
Please change the algorithms of news in social media. Now, I think you need to post more on the message of wildlife conservation, so it can balance out the algorithms about whoever cheating with whom, and then who having dinners with who. Because at least when the news become viral, then we get the attentions from the authority that really need to pay more attention to this issue. So you guys so much into social media, just please change the algorithms of the news that's circulating in the social media.
I agree with you with that, but for me it's like you have to choose wisely. You have to know that what you going to buy, what are you what are you going to share on social media? It's affect the wildlife conservation or not? It's like as I already told you that the wildlife trade is. There are two angles of that, the legal one and illegal one. If you're gonna choose something like for animal for your pet, you have to choose wisely. You have to know the if the animal you're gonna choose where they from is that from the authorized shop, yeah. Not choose the illegal one. Not choose the cheap one, not choose the one that posts online that give you very responsible, how to say that? The cheap price, not go for that.
So it's a message, right? One message for all the youth. I think my message would have to be patient. Please don't give up. These problems require a long time, intergenerational effort. And sometimes it may seem that you're chugging along and struggling along and dragging your feet for 5 years, and you may think nothing has changed, and then something's changed in the 8th year or the 10th year. Trust takes time to build, and change takes time to happen, but it is possible. Traditions even can change. So please hang in for the long fight. Please. Don't give up before it is time to give up. That will be my message to you.
I don't know if this is just one point or a lot of points. If I try to distill it down, is to keep an open mind. Because when I went to vet school, I thought it brings me closer to the path of being a wildlife vet, right? Or being able to help animals, wildlife, and affect their conservation, save the species, and all that. But actually, I think going to vet school probably set me back a little bit. Don't really want to draw attention to Jessica over there, but Jessica and I went to uni, not together, about 1 year apart. I never knew her in uni, but actually we were in the same space a lot at the time. But she's not a vet. But then she got on this conservation path in her career a lot earlier than I did. Because in vet school, actually, you learn nothing about wildlife or birds. You learn about cats and dogs, cows, sheep, and all the domestic animals, right? So after you graduate, if you wanted to get into wildlife, there's another few years of expanding on what you learned in vet school. Whereas when you're trying to choose a course or what, if it brings you more directly to what you want to work with or work as, then maybe that's a quicker way. Or if you have already chosen a course that you're thinking doesn't help with conservation, actually, it's about keeping an open mind, because with AI these days, a lot of computer science graduates and people in different fields are actually involved in wildlife, but utilizing their own skills and knowledge. So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you all for such beautiful advices. I think we are all appreciative of them. So let's wrap up with this panel.